All right, fellas, loaded show tonight. We've got a fantastic guest on the way. Also got some news to talk about from the world of Star Wars, which is always a fun topic for us. We got Dude Mail, we got White Flag, going to be a full show. So, but real quick, I did want to kind of get our thoughts in on El Camino. That dropped on Netflix since last we recorded. We plugged it a lot. We've all been big Breaking Bad fans for long time, so we were looking forward to this. So I did want to real quick get your thoughts on that. Dave, I'll start with you. El Camino, man, did you like it?
I was a bit disappointed. I was hoping for a bit more fleshed out story, something with a little more to it.
Okay.
Overall, I'd give it probably a B minus, C plus.
Okay. Scott, El Camino, what'd you think?
I'm right there with you, Dave. I thought at times it was a little slow. Seemed to miss on some story points, and it was a fun watch. But I'm not going to line up to watch it again anytime soon.
Fair enough. Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I will go so far as to say, though, that I did like it upon giving it a second viewing. I liked it a bit more than the first. I think I just needed to kind of adjust my mindset. I was looking for, I think, something novel to really add something to Breaking Bad, and this didn't really do that. At the end of the day, for me, this felt more like when you've seen the theatrical cut of a movie, and then you go back after time and watch a director's cut that's got a bunch of extra footage. The extra stuff just kind of adds to what was already there and complements what you love to begin with. It didn't really change the game in any way, shape, or form, and I'm glad that's exactly the way that they went. So I thought it was a nice fitting into Aaron Paul's character. Still leaves the ending of Breaking Bad perfectly intact, which we all loved, and did some nice things. So, all right, El Camino, folks, check it out. Let's get to the show.
Onboard computer synchronization.
Now entering the nexus of geekery and guy world. In 3, 2, 1, mark.
Hello, IT? Have you tried turning it off and on again?
This is the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast, a service of Shark Flight Publishing.
Hey everybody, welcome back for episode 10 of the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. I am your host, Ian J. Malone, joined as always by my good friends Dave Daniels, Scott Esther. Going to get to those guys in just a second. But before we do that, you know the spiel, the ways you can find us. We are online at dudesinhyperspace.com. We also do the social media thing at Facebook and Twitter at the Hyperdudes. We'll get you there for either one of those. If you want to hit us up with a question, drop them into the comments. Hashtag us at #DudeMail. You can also even email us if you're old school like the old farts that we are. We go for that too. dudesinhyperspace at gmail.com. So, fellas, lots of stuff to get to this evening. Going to be a fun show. Got a great guest, but real quick and in a hurry, what's been going on with y'all? Scott, actually, I want to start with you. You've been on the injury list, man. How you feeling?
So I've been, I'm doing all right. A little bit of work travel. You always pick up a little bit of the funk if you spend too much time on the airplane. So, good to be back. Good to hear you guys' voices again, and ready to do this.
Cool deal. Dave, how's things down in Florida, man?
I got hashtagged over the weekend, and it was pretty nice, actually.
You got hashtag. Do I need context to be able to understand what that means?
That is what you were talking about, right? When the hashtags.
Somebody hashtagged you with a dude mail?
No. Okay. Well, I guess we're obviously not talking about the same thing here. So, hey, my weekend was great. How was yours?
All right. So, yeah, we're professionals. It's what we do. Mm-hmm. We've done this before. So weekend was good. We pretty well just hung around the house. The weather was absolutely gross on Sunday, which was perfectly fine because we had nowhere to be. I made a giant ass pot of vegetable beef soup that cooked for about 6-7 hours. A couple of cold ones, turned on the race, and really just gave myself the day off. So it was a beautiful thing. But all right, as teased at the outset, we are not alone this evening. We bring ourselves a guest. This is a guy that listeners of this podcast probably know quite well. You've seen him around at cons. He's quite the celebrity, as it were. He is a teller of tales, a righter of wrongs, a defender of ladies' virtues. Some even call him Maurice, for he speaks from the pompatus of love. That is right. He is, of course, the epic award-winning best-selling author of the Black Knight Chronicles. He's also the guy behind the Quincy Harker series and the wildly hilarious Bubba the Monster Hunter. I am, of course, speaking of the one, the only, Mr. John G. Hartness. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you letting me come spend some time with you this evening.
Pleasure's all ours, man. I figure if nothing else, it gives us both an opportunity to plug our new book that we are both in.
That's right.
That's right. Timing, synergy, it's a thing.
All of those things.
For those who follow us on social media, you know that I was just in a new anthology that came out in Kevin Steverson's Salvage Title universe called Salvage Conquest, Tales from the Salvage Title universe. And my good friend Mr. Hartness here also contributed a story. So that was a good time. That was a fun one to be a part of.
I was super excited. Chris Kennedy, who runs the press that put that out, creatively entitled Chris Kennedy Publishing. Chris and I are good friends for quite a while, and we've been trying to come up with a project to work together on. And most of what they produce and are known for is military science fiction.
Yep.
Well, I don't do that. I do more zoom, pew, pew space opera stuff. Or, fart jokes and explosions. But I read the Salvage Title books from Kevin earlier this year, and I was like, I love these.
Yeah.
And I was at LibertyCon, and I was talking to Chris and said, hey, I love these books. He said, well, we're doing an anthology. You want to do a story? Sure, no problem. I don't have anything else going on. This is why I should not be allowed out unsupervised.
Yeah, for those who don't follow John, he's kind of one of those guys who's pretty much putting something out every time you turn around.
Yeah, and I hadn't done short fiction in quite a while before this year. So, of course, this year I started off with a story in the Jordan Kahn Charity Anthology, and then I followed that up with this story in Chris's anthology. Then, coming out later this month, I've got a story in the Predators in Petticoats anthology from Prospective Press. Then I've got to still turn in stories for Zombies Need Brains anthology and a Baen Books charity anthology. And in April, I've got a story in Fantastic Hope coming from Penguin, which is edited by Laurel K. Hamilton and William McCaskey. So I hadn't done an anthology in like 5 years, and this year I've done 6 of them. Nice.
The phrase one-legged man in a butt-kicking contest comes to mind.
Oh, son, you ain't lying. My God. That's on top of the, I don't know, I've released like 4 novels this year.
Right.
A couple of novellas. I have at least 2 more novels that have to be written this year, one of which has to be released. And I run a publishing company.
Yeah, we're going to get to all of that, actually. So, well, let's start from the top.
Sure.
You're a professional writer. How did that happen?
Oh, good God. Who knows?
So say we all, my friend.
You know, the funny thing about being a writer and really any kind of career in the arts, there's a couple of things. One, you find any 10 professional writers and you ask them how it happened for them, and you're going to get at least 13 different stories about how it happened. And writing, acting, music, dance, any of those artistic endeavors, your professionalism is not defined by your revenue. You can be absolutely as professional as the person at the top of the New York Times bestseller list and only publish 2 stories a year and still have a great day job.
Yeah.
Now, I do make my living writing. I've been very fortunate in that regard, but it didn't come quick and it didn't come easy.
Yeah, I was going to say, looking at your career, man, you tapped on the arts just a second ago. You've done a little of all of that. I mean, you've been an actor, you've worked in lighting, you've been a designer, you've been a theater director. I mean, you've done a little of everything. So what was it out of all of that that drilled you down eventually toward writing?
When I was a kid, all I wanted to be was a writer. And when I went to college, I was an English major for a little bit. Then I found theater, and their parties were way better. So I changed majors. I 100% changed majors because the parties were better. And then I moved into a career in theater, and then I ran a small theater. I designed well over 100 productions. I directed, I produced. And then I found poker. And Texas Hold'em poker is responsible for my writing career.
That's a new one. I've never heard Texas Hold'em poker given as the answer as to how somebody became a professional writer. But this won't surprise anybody who knows you, by the way. Your sense of humor is pretty legendary for that.
So here's the journey. I don't remember if it was 99 or 2000, but somewhere around there, I was at home at my parents' house for Thanksgiving. And we had all just stuffed ourselves because we're all fat Southern people. And we're sitting in the living room, about to slip into a food coma. Nobody wants to watch the Cowboys and Lions play. So we were flipping across ESPN, and I see this World Series of Poker on ESPN. And I've never watched anybody play poker before because I was like, why would I watch somebody play cards? But I did. And this kind of schlubby looking redneck from Tennessee named Chris Moneymaker won $1 million playing poker. And I thought, well, if that redneck can do it, this redneck ought to be able to do it.
I remember Chris Moneymaker. The shades, the hat, the visor.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember. That was in the heyday of, like, when they ran poker in primetime on ESPN.
Yeah, he started the whole thing, and they even called it the Moneymaker effect because he was the perfect catalyst. Because he was an accountant. He paid $40 to get in an online poker tournament and won his way into the World Series of Poker main event and won $1 million.
Yeah.
It did exactly what everyone hoped it would do. It inspired idiots like me to learn to play poker and lose a lot of money. Well, I started reading blogs about people who write poker so I could kind of learn more about the game. And I wanted to play in some of these private tournaments that the poker bloggers that I was reading were having. But the only way you could get in is if you wrote a poker blog. I didn't have a blog. So I started one just so I could get in these poker tournaments. Then I wrote on that poker blog every day for about 5 years. And by the time 5 years rolled around, none of us had really gotten very good at playing poker, but we got really good at writing about it. So we started getting hired by the different poker reporting sites to cover tournaments. And my gig for 4 years with the World Series of Poker was I got up early in the morning before I went to my day job, and I took all of the live blogs from the day before in a poker event and condensed them into a 1,000-word feature article for the website. And they paid me a pile of money for that.
Nice.
And yeah, it was great. So I did that for about 4 years. Then I had an argument with my editor. The argument was over a deadline. She thought I had one and I didn't. She won that argument. And I decided that, well, I'll show her. I'll write the great American novel. And I accomplished 2/3 of that. I am an American and I did indeed write a novel. Its greatness is subjective. But I wrote a book. I had never written long-form fiction before. Never really thought about it. But I sat down and wrote a book. And then I was like, well, what the hell do I do with it now?
Right.
So I did just like what I did with poker. I went on the internet and learned about publishing. And then I realized that that takes a long time. Well, I'm not a patient man. So I self-published my first book in 2009.
All right.
And 10 years and 22 novel-length works later, here we are.
There you go. Hey, man, that was an interesting time in publishing, right around that 2009, 2010 marker.
Oh, my God, it was
Amazon.
the Wild West.
Oh, yeah. I remember my first book went live a couple of years after that when we were still kind of in that climate. And I blinked one morning and woke up and I had moved 150 some odd copies. I was just like, whoa, what is this that we're doing here?
I know, right? I was the same way. And then looking back on it, I realized that if I had published the book 6 months earlier instead of spending a year doing research, I would have already had a book out when a lot of people were in the right place at the right time to catch lightning in a bottle and make a bucket of money. So I missed that opportunity. But, things have worked out okay.
Well, John, I got to ask, obviously you're known for your humor in your books. Is that somehow, did it come from something you watched growing up? Is it just something you've developed over time? Or where exactly does the humor come from? And just as a secondary question, what did you watch growing up? Because it seems pretty eclectic.
Well, I come from a family of smart alecks. My whole family, we're a snarky, smart alecky, quick-witted crowd. It was always a gauntlet whenever anybody would bring a new girlfriend or boyfriend home for Thanksgiving. Because if you survive that meal with us, all right, you've got thick enough skin to stick around. And that probably had a lot to do with it. And as far as what I watched growing up, a lot of MASH. Me and my dad would sit and
Okay.
watch MASH. Um, a lot of pro wrestling. And then just what was on TV in the 80s. Knight Rider, the old Battlestar Galactica. Watched the Star Trek original series on reruns. Now, I lived out in the country, so we didn't get cable until, well, we got a satellite when I was in high school. So there was no HBO or anything when I was growing up, and no MTV ever.
Do you think that some of that kind of snarky dialogue and stuff that you have going on though came from wrestling when the promos going through, or I mean, where do you think that came from on the other end?
Probably. There's definitely some dusty roads going on in some of my dialogue, and also a lot of it comes from theater. Having read a lot of plays and dissected the way that people talk to each other in plays has really helped me write dialogue. David Mamet is hilarious once you get into the cadence of what he's saying. And the same with Sam Shepard. Those guys write amazing dialogue, and reading so much of that I picked it up by osmosis. I wasn't reading with intent for analyzing the writing, but I read so much of it I couldn't help it.
Sure. Well, that actually segues nicely into the next question that I had for you, which was when it came time to pick genres. You talked about how you write space opera, and then obviously you do lots of the urban fantasy stuff with the Quincy Harkers and the Bubbas and that variety. What was it about those genres that drew you to it? Why write in that area?
Oh, I just started writing what I liked to read.
There you go.
I got into writing urban fantasy because I was reading Jim Butcher and Kim Harrison and Laurel K. Hamilton, and I was watching True Blood, and I was like, okay,
Right.
I can tell some of these stories. The Black Knight Chronicles came about because I was watching season 1 of True Blood, and there was an episode where Lafayette goes to meet this guy who's a vampire, and he shows up, and it's this pudgy, pasty, 40-something-year-old vampire. And I'm thinking, yeah, there should be more fat vampires. Because, I mean, you look at me, and I'm a big old boy. And then you look at somebody like Vampire Bill from True Blood. Well, he's awful skinny. If I'm a vampire, the fat guy's got more going on. And it's probably better marbled, like a good old ribeye. So I'm going to have more blood, it's going to taste better, and I'm going to be easier to catch. So there should logically be more fat vampires. And that's where Black Knight Chronicles came from. I was like, well, if he's fat, standard comedy trope is he's got a tall, skinny friend. So, Laurel Hardy, Abbott and Costello, all that.
Right.
And then I was like, well, what kind of people are they? And I've always been a comic book nerd, so I was like, okay, well, write what you know.
Sure.
Fat nerds.
How did Bubba come around?
So, more than once, I've been asked if Bubba the Monster Hunter is a spin-off of Larry Correia's Monster Hunter International series, which is not at all the case.
Okay.
But, in a very different way, Larry Correia is part of the inspiration for Bubba the Monster Hunter. When I went to Dragon Con in 2011, I met Larry for the first time. And he hands me this lime green hat with a Monster Hunter International logo on it and says, here, we're doing a flash mob. We're going to get a pile of people to wear these hats and do a flash mob. And I was like, thanks for the hat. I'm never putting this on my head. But then I thought about it and I was like, if anybody would hunt monsters, it would be this giant of a man.
Right.
Who's a firearms instructor for decades. I was like, that guy would hunt monsters.
Right.
But he'd be funnier if he were a redneck.
Right.
So I took the size of Larry Correia and the look of a guy that I used to do rock and roll shows with back in the 90s named Dr. Nick. And Dr. Nick looked like every guy who was ever on Sons of Anarchy.
Okay.
The long braided ponytail, the long beard, the pile of tattoos, and he was a solid 6'8" and 350 if he was an ounce. And that's where Bubba came from physically.
Right.
So then I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to call him Bubba the Monster Hunter, well, it's pretty easy to come up with a plot. Let's hunt a monster. And then, again, comedy is frequently all about the opposites. So if I'm going to have a giant white redneck with a huge gun, his sidekick should be a skinny African-American gay man who's good with computers. And that's how Skeeter came about. And then I added a love interest because rednecks need love too.
There you go. Yeah, no, I loved everything about that character. My wife was actually the one who pointed me toward it just because of the cover of the first book, which is Waffle House, is it not?
The title is Scattered, Smothered, and Chunked.
There you go. So, yeah, I picked that up off of Audible, I want to say, after I ran into you at Congregate a couple of years back and checked it out and had an absolute blast with it. There was so much about that character that I resonated with. And if memory serves, the next time I saw you at a Logicon, we had a whole conversation about the state of modern day pro wrestling and country music. So,
yeah, because I will wax poetic about both of those things for a long time if you let me.
Yep, that's a lot of beers material right there.
Oh, you ain't even lying.
So, well, cool deal. So that kind of tells us a little bit about your writing. Not a whole lot of people really want to pull the trigger and go full bore as a publisher. It takes a very special type of individual to want to take that on. 2016.
The word you're looking for is insane.
That too. So the year is 2016. You partner up with some folks to create Falstaff Books. Talk to me about how that happened.
So, I have a bad habit of opening my mouth and sticking my foot in it up to the knee. Middle of 2015, I was at Con Carolinas, and a couple of good friends of mine had a novel that they had been shopping around for a couple of years. And I had read an early version of it, and I'd kind of championed this book with a couple of agents that I had had contact with, and with my publisher for the Black Knight Chronicles, Bellbridge Books, but they just weren't getting any traction. So they come up to me and they say, "We think we're just going to self-publish this book." And I look them in the face and say, "Please, God, don't do that." Now, remember, at the time, I was purely self-published.
Right.
And I said, "Please, God, don't do that." And they said, "Why?" "Because you two would be the least successful self-published authors I've ever known." They're both great writers and good editors also. But neither one of them is particularly strong on social media and self-promotion. And they're both tenured professors at universities.
Okay.
So neither one of them has a whole lot of time to learn promotion.
Right.
Or really interest in doing it. So I explained that to them. They're like, "Well, yeah, you're probably right." So I said, "Hey, look, all right, here's the deal. Keep shopping it till the end of this year. If you haven't sold it by the end of the year, I'll publish the damn thing." I get an email mid-December that says, "So, did you mean it?" And I did. I did mean it. So that's how Falstaff started. Was I saw a project from a couple of friends of mine that wasn't getting the traction that I felt like it deserved, and I wanted to put it out there and make it available.
You're spot on when you say that to be an indie, now more than ever, you have to be a shameless self-promoter. To be a writer, period, you got to be a shameless self-promoter. But particularly to be an indie, you have no chance, because there's so much noise in the marketplace that to cut through, you've got to find a unique voice, and that requires mastering the skills that you talk about. So that's when traditional publishing is a nice place to be, to have that help.
No, that's absolutely correct. And Falstaff is a very small press. We have one employee and a bunch of contracted people. Small presses serve a couple of different roles, and one of the roles that we serve is we're not supposed to teach you how to write a book. You better know that before you get to us. But we can help you learn how to be a published writer. We can help you get on panels at conventions, learn how to run a table at a convention, how to just talk to other writers. how to help lift each other up, how to start a newsletter, how to do these things, that there is no real training program for, although I'm working on that, and we can touch on that a little later too. So that's one of the roles that small presses really serve. The other role that we serve, and I've been really lucky in this regard, is that for experienced, established writers who are multiple traditionally published authors, we serve as a home for their misfit projects. Their project that doesn't fit with what their other publishers see them as writing. Well, I'm up for it. Let's go. Chris Jackson has published a couple dozen tie-in novels and self-published some horror novels. And Chris is a fantastic writer, been around for quite a while. And yes, Chris, if you're listening, I did just call you old. But Chris comes to me a couple of years ago and says, hey, I've got a novel that's finished, but the press that I was going to publish it through went under. You want to take a look at it? I was like, let's see. You've got 20-something novels under your belt.
Right.
You're a regular on the convention circuit. Yeah, I think I'm good. Let's take a look at it. The first one is called Dragons of Boston. It came out back in the summer at Con Carolinas. The second will be out next June. It's going to be a great trilogy for us.
Awesome.
But that's the other kind of thing that a small press can do, is we can provide that avenue to publication for the thing that some traditional presses don't want to pick up.
Cool stuff, man. Well, that's actually really insightful for a lot of people to know. You mentioned that you're doing a training thing now. What is that all about? I know you're on Patreon. I know you've got some different places where people can go and learn from you, but, formally and for the record, how exactly does that work if people want to get involved with that?
So there's two main things that I've got going on. I do a fairly regular YouTube video series called 10 Things I Hate About Your Writing.
Okay.
Where I go over some of the most common mistakes I see in submissions. Either the book may start in the wrong place, the writing may use too many copulas, and then I have to explain what copulas are, because nobody teaches you
Right.
what those are. And I'm not going to say it here because I want people to go watch the videos.
Fair enough.
I also give reports from conventions and background on conventions. And that's a pretty regular series of videos that I post on the Falstaff Books YouTube channel. But coming up in March in Charlotte, Falstaff Books is producing a professional development conference for genre fiction writers. So for people who want to get published or want to self-publish and hone their craft, we've got a whole string of presentations by professional writers. We also have a set of presentations on the business side. So for people who want to learn how to sell more books or be more productive or lay out a better looking book, we've got a series of workshops for that. It's patterned a little after Kevin J. Anderson's Superstars of Writing series.
Okay.
Where he brings in folks like Jonathan Mayberry and Jim Butcher and Brandon Sanderson, and you go somewhere out west, I don't remember where, maybe Phoenix, but don't hold me to that.
Mm-hmm.
And you spend a few days with those guys learning. Well, there's nothing like that on the East Coast. So I built one.
Okay.
And I'm bringing in Richard Kadrey, who created the Sandman Slim series, Mary Mancusi, who writes middle grade for Disney, Faith Hunter, who's a New York Times bestselling urban fantasy author, David B. Coe, who's an award-winning epic fantasy author, A.J. Hartley, who's a New York Times bestselling thriller and fantasy author, Chris Kennedy, who we talked about, is going to come and talk about business, Quincy Allen, who for a couple of years handled all of the interior layouts for Wordfire Press, is going to teach book layout and design. Deb Dixon, who's the publisher of Bellbridge Books, is going to teach her goal, motivation, and conflict half-day workshop. So my goal in hiring faculty for this event is to get people is to get enough good people that I'm not qualified to teach at my own conference.
Fair enough. So what is the conference called, and where can people find out about it?
The conference is called Saga,
Okay.
and you can go to sagaconference.com, or you can link to it from the Falstaff Books website.
All right. Well, speaking of Falstaff, I do want to kind of kick back there and circle back to them and get back to the fun stuff, which is the fiction. You mentioned the Jackson trilogy. What else is going on at Falstaff these days that is exciting, whether it's your work, whether it's the work of some of your other authors that people ought to know about?
Well, we just came back from the Multiverse Convention in Atlanta, which was great because not only was Chris a guest there, Darren Kennedy was a guest there, and we've got his Fugue and Fable trilogy. We're going to be releasing Queen's Peril, which is the sequel to his book Pawn's Gambit. It'll come out either very late this year or very early in 2020. Stuart Jaffe, who was a guest at Multiverse, is going to be doing a trilogy of high fantasy detective novels coming out in 2021. We're going to rapid release those. It'll be 3 novels, 1 each month across the summer.
Okay.
We just released the 5th and final book in the Withrow Chronicles by Michael G. Williams, some hilarious vampire comedy stuff. We just signed the contract for David B. Coe's book that'll come out next year. It's called Time's Assassin. It is the 3rd book in his Isle Vale cycle. The first 2 were published by Angry Robot, and we picked up the 3rd.
Wow.
And I'm ecstatic to have David doing a book for us. And we've got a couple other people that the ink's not dry on the contracts yet that are equally as exciting. So we're cooking right along. This year I think we're on pace to do 50 or 60 titles, and we're probably going to do that many again next year.
Wow. Good grief alive. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So, well, I can't let you run down that roster and not tell me what's going on with Quincy Harker, man. Ever since I heard about that series, I picked up book 1, absolutely loved it. For those who have never heard of this, think Harry Dresden, but with a vampire twist and a lot saltier. This guy is, you think I'm jaded, people. This guy is, he is something. But
he's a lot older than you, too. So
he does have some
seen
years
some
on
stuff.
me. Yeah, he has. So, but great character. What's happening in the world of Harker these days?
Well, for the first 4 years I was writing Quincy Harker, I was doing them as linked novellas. So I would release a 30,000-word novella every 3 months. Then at the end of the year, I'd collect it, and I'd do Harker year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. This year, I flipped the script, and I'm releasing 2 Quincy Harker novels.
Okay.
The first one, book 5, was called Carl Perkins' Cadillac, and it came out in late June. And the currently untitled book 6 should come out in December. And it's been a lot of fun to be able to stretch the narrative into a different form, because when you're constrained by that 30,000-word novella length, your descriptions have to be tighter, your introspective scenes have to be shorter. I've really enjoyed working in a longer form. I think book 5 is the best of the Harker series so far, and all of them are available hardcover, paperback, ebook, and audio. That was another exciting thing. Tantor Media has picked up the audio for Harker, so that means that the audiobooks produce more quickly, and I get a little money up front, which is always nice.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Well, for those who don't want to take my word on it, we can also get a vote of confidence on the Harker series from none other than Guinan herself, Whoopi Goldberg, who picked this as, what was it, one of her favorite books of the year on The View last year?
Yeah, last year she featured the Harker series as one of her top gift ideas under $50, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not often that a mid-list fantasy author gets their work in front of 3 million people on The View.
Sure.
And she just happened to stumble across the audio.
Wow.
And, also, I was able to land another famous fan of that series, which ties into other stuff we're going to talk a little bit about. I got a DM one time from none other than Paul White.
Oh!
WWE champ, The Big Show.
Oh, all righty. Well, you know what? Let's just jump right into that. How did that happen? We can talk wrestling. Folks who listen to the show know that.
All right. Well, in addition to writing and running a publishing company, I do a podcast called Authors and Dragons, where along with 5 other idiots, I play Dungeons and Dragons really badly every 2 weeks. And we record a spectacularly not safe for work podcast, and it's D&D comedy.
Okay.
So I was watching the Wizards of the Coast stream of Many Eyes, which is a 3-day event that they do, and I saw Joe Manganiello from True Blood was playing D&D live in front of an audience with The Big Show. And I was like, well, this ought to be entertaining. So I watched it. I thought The Big Show was hilarious.
Right.
And I sent out a tweet that said, hey, just watched at WWE Big Show on Stream of Many Eyes. We need to get him on Authors and Dragons because he was the funniest thing on the show. A few minutes later, I get a notification on my phone that says, Paul White followed you on Twitter. I was like, somebody spoofed The Big Show's account. That's funny. And then I noticed that there's a little blue check mark by the name at WWE Big Show. And I was like, that's cool. The Big Show's followed me on Twitter because I mentioned him. That's fun. And then I get a DM that says, hey man, thanks for the shout out. I'm a big fan. Then LOL, obviously I'm a big fan. So, of course, being, smooth, I tweeted him back, wait, what? You're a fan of me? And he says, yeah, I just got on Twitter to follow my favorite writers. And he sends me a screen cap of his phone where he's currently listening to a Harker audiobook on the plane.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I was like, damn. Because I remember watching The Big Show when he was the giant in WCW.
Yeah.
When he very first appeared and won the world championship on his first televised match.
Yep.
So that was super cool for me to have somebody who I'd watched for 25 years say that they liked the work I did. I mean, obviously it was also incredibly cool when I got that email from Whoopi, and I might have made her send me proof of life because I didn't believe it was really her.
Well, we could sit around here all day long and talk about old school professional wrestling. That is not a problem. But it's interesting that we're doing this interview now because we're in a wild time for pro wrestling, and it's been a while since we've been able to say that. There's lots going on. You've got WWE now on Fox. You've got AEW in full swing back on TNT. We've got a Wednesday Night War with Dynamite versus NXT. I mean, you still got Impact floating around out there. As a guy who's followed this stuff for years and years and years, what are your thoughts on what's happening in wrestling right now?
Man, the last time it was this good to be a wrestling fan, it was another century.
Okay.
I mean, you've got WWE with a roster that is so stacked they can't use half the people they've got hired.
Right.
They've just got that much talent. You've got AEW with incredible talent. You've got New Japan selling out 20,000-seat arenas in the U.S.
Right.
You've got Ring of Honor doing some great stuff. You've still got Impact hanging out. The NWA is relevant again.
With Billy Corgan, of all people.
Yeah, the dude from Smashing Pumpkins is now all about smashing heads.
Yeah, no doubt. I saw a great interview with him when he, not long after he bought that company, and I asked him why. He's like, I went to NWA shows with my dad when I was for as long as I can remember. When I was a little kid, that's the brand that I grew up with. And I know we're probably never going to challenge for big time supremacy in the business, but this brand should be relevant again. It should have a rightful place, and that's what I'm doing.
I mean, God bless them, but let's try not to put the Rock and Roll Express in main storylines anymore because you really, right about the time that they start sending you Social Security checks, you should not be on the active roster.
Yeah, no.
But I mean, I was going to make a joke about an AARP card, and then I remembered how old Chris Jericho is, and I shut my mouth.
Yeah, he still has $1 million on the mic, though, man. There are a few people out there that can still hang with him on a mic.
Hell, he's still at 75% of his in-ring prime.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jericho.
still waiting for him to do the truffle shuffle on the air, though.
Chris Jericho has absolutely moved into my top 3 or 4 of all time with the work he's put in the last 5 years. I'm super excited about AEW.
Yeah.
They've got so many fantastic characters. Darby Allin is an incredible character. Orange Cassidy, that guy's hilarious.
Right.
First time I saw him, I was like, what the F is this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then I watched the match. Then the bell rang, and I was like, he's incredible.
Yep. No, they've got some good stuff happening in AEW. I think it's different enough that it's going to carve out its own niche. I think it seems to bring the goods where the in-ring product is concerned, but I love the fact that they're not requiring these guys to script promos. They get to do it themselves and have some input over what their character is going to be. And for my money, that's what led to the downfall of the WWE. I know they still bring in a lot of numbers, but I don't watch it anymore, and that's why. Because every time I turn it on, for all of the talent that they have over there, I feel like it's the reboot culture in pro wrestling. Yeah. I've seen every person on that roster in another incarnation somewhere.
Absolutely. I mean, AEW's got Maxwell J. Friedman, who is the best heel in wrestling today.
He was the best thing on their premiere episode a couple of weeks ago for me. I tweeted that out, actually. I was like, this guy's money. They need this guy front and center. He's got the goods.
He is the only person I've seen in the past 10 years play a heel that good as The Miz.
Yeah.
And then they turned him babyface and whatever. Now nobody cares.
All right. Well, I will close this little topic with this question. If you could pick 3 guys right now in pro wrestling, active duty guys right now, WWE, AEW, New Japan, whatever, you're going to start your own promotion. President Hartness. Who are the 3 guys you're taking with you to launch your brand?
Adam Cole.
Okay.
Maxwell J. Friedman. Ricochet.
Well, on that note, my friend, I think we're going to draw this little session to a close. It has been a pleasure chatting with you. Before we let you go, though, tell folks where they can find you, whether it's on the web, whether it's on social media. Where are the best places to catch up with John G. Hartness?
I've got a Facebook group, which is John G. Hartness Books. My professional Facebook page is facebook.com/John G. Hartness. My Twitter is @JohnHartness. My Instagram, which is largely useless, is @JohnHartness. JohnHartness.com, FalstaffBooks.com, SagaConference.com. I try not to do anything terribly original with my social media handles. And then every 2 weeks you can listen to me on the Authors and Dragons podcast with 5 of the best indie comedy, fantasy, and science fiction writers you'll ever hear.
Awesome stuff. Well, folks, go check him out. As you can tell by this interview, he is a most colorful individual, and I can promise you that definitely bleeds through on his characters, whom you will thoroughly enjoy. So, John, thanks again for coming on, brother, and we will have you again sometime soon.
Thank you all so much for having me. I appreciate you spending time with me.
And now the news.
All right, folks, so in case you've been living under a rock, the final trailer for Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker dropped last night with Monday Night Football, and that was a good thing because, well, the ball game was absolutely garbage. But a lot of folks were watching for this. Mainly they were watching to see how this would impact ticket sales, because pre-sales went online last night for people to go buy, and given what happened with The Last Jedi and the division in the fan base over all that, there were a lot of eyeballs on the sales numbers for this one. And wouldn't you know it, Star Wars hits it out of the park. According to Slash Film and the ticket tracker AtomTickets.com, in the first hour of pre-sales, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker outpaced Avengers Endgame by 45%. So they are going to make mad freaking cash off of this money. Star Wars Rise of Jedi, of course, concludes the Skywalker saga, stars Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, and others, and arrives in theaters December 20th. So everybody's had a chance to see the trailer. You can go find it on our Facebook page and Twitter feed if you have not. You guys are both diehard Star Wars fans, so this is the final trailer. So last thing we're going to get before the movie drops in December. Dave, I'll start with you. Go ahead, man. What you think?
I find it incredibly hard not to get excited whenever something Star Wars comes on. No matter what has happened with the last 2 movies, I just find it incredibly hard not to get excited. So I'm holding back. I still want to keep some of that in reserve, but it definitely looked good to me.
All right, Scott.
Yeah, I thought it was an awesome trailer. got me really excited about the film. And since this is the only thing I'm going to get to watch between now and the theater release, then that's all I got to work with. Like the fact that it spent a little more time in the storytelling instead of like full on action. I think we're going to get a better look and an idea of what the story they're going to try to tell in this last iteration of it.
Yep. No, I wholly agree. It's well, final trailers do typically give you a little bit more to work with, and this was certainly the case. I would have liked a little bit more of a hint as to what the story is going to be, but J.J. Abrams has a reputation for liking to play it pretty close to the vest with regard to that sort of thing. One thing I did like about it, and I found this out after the fact, a lot of the look of some of the set pieces, particularly the Palpatine throne with like the spikes coming off of it. I don't know if that's supposed to be ice or whatever. That is actually a shout out to the original McQuarrie artwork for the Emperor's Throne in Return of the Jedi back in the early 80s. So, JJ is obviously a big fan and a big student of Star Wars and its earliest origins, and he wants to reflect that with this. So a lot of the set pieces and the stuff that's coming about actually came from early drafts and from early images of some of the art that was created. So that's very cool. Again, it's all going to come down to story for me. That's what I'm interested to see here. I get it. It's going to be a good-looking film. J.J. Abrams can make a great-looking film. I just want to know if he's going to tell me a good story, because so far I haven't really gotten that in the new sequel trilogy. We'll see. There's obviously tons there to tell you. This is the last one, evidenced by 3PO going, "One more time to look at my friends." Blah, 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 blah. So we'll see. I still walk into it with zero expectations. I won't be heartbroken if I walk out and it's awful. I don't think I'll be over the moon if it's awesome. I'm certainly hoping for the latter, without a doubt. But my expectations for Star Wars have definitely been tempered over the last few years. Any big takeaways from the trailer that specifically you're looking forward to seeing? I know a lot of people have pointed to what looks like Rey and Kylo slashing down the Darth Vader helmet. Other people have pointed to, them going back to the Death Star. That was made clear in this. You see him in the trashed Emperor's throne room in the trailer. What were some of the images or things that really jumped out to you guys in this that you're looking forward to seeing on the 20th?
So I'm really looking forward to the revisiting the Death Star. It's not only is it nostalgic, but it's just going to be interesting to see how they can tie in the Emperor and what happens with all that. So I'm definitely interested to see what they do with all that.
All right, Scott.
Yeah, for me, it's more seeing how they tie in the character of the Emperor, and as well as how Luke plays a factor in Rey's progression into the Jedi arts. So, I don't know that she's necessarily going to turn full Jedi, but she obviously has the struggle of good and evil inside. So we'll see what happens there, and see if Luke's been able to mentor her while we've had this sort of break between films.
I will say that is one thing that's going to be interesting about this. I believe I read that this is set 5 years after the events of The Last Jedi, and that's a good thing. That's a very good thing, because one of the big gripes that a lot of people have had with the character of Rey is that she's a Mary Sue, and she really is when you get right down to it. I mean, if you track Force Awakens through the end of The Last Jedi, all of that takes place over the course of not even a week? And she goes from having never even seen a lightsaber to being an absolute pro in the throne room with Kylo there in Snoke's throne room. I mean, you blinks and she's awesome. So, a lot of people didn't really think that was earned. So at least this way, with there being time, she's had time to learn, to study the wills journals, which you saw at the end of TLJ. She's had a chance to come into her own naturally and practice and learn and perform and train. So now when she steps on the big stage for the final chapter, it makes a little bit more sense that she knows what she's doing. I'm actually kind of happy about that. So, alrighty, fellas. Well, Scott, you are on the road heading home from soccer practice, so we're going to go ahead and turn you loose. So I know you got the family stuff. Dave and I are going to field some dude mail questions, and we will roll out from there. Oh, Scott, real quick before I let you go, World Series picks, man. Who do you got?
I've got the Astros in 6.
Astros in 6. All right. Pitching the big reason there?
Yeah, pitching, and I don't know that the Nationals will have enough bats to put out there to combat what the Astros have. I mean, watching the end of the Yankees-Astros series, seeing what they did to Chapman in that last inning, they've got too much.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, brother. We'll drive safe. Enjoy the rest of soccer practice, and I will catch you on the flip side. I think our next episode is going to be a little bit of a track back for college football, so it should be fun.
Perfect. Sounds good. Take care, guys.
See ya. Dave,
See ya.
let's do some dude mail.
You got mail.
Okay, dude mail question number 1 comes to our friend Alan. Hey, dudes. Much has been made of the are comic book movies real films or not debate, thanks to recent comments from Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola. Clearly, you guys are fanboys, but you're obviously have an appreciation for quality filmmaking, evidenced by your hot take review of Joker a couple of weeks ago. Time to weigh in. Comic book films, are they real movies or are they not? Thanks for your dude mail, or thanks for fielding my dude mail, and stay awesome. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate that. All right, Dave, I'll let you have first crack at this. Comic book movies, man, it's been a hot topic of debate lately in the press. They're crap movies, they're despicable, or no, they're modern-day works of art. What are your thoughts on this?
I think they're both. I think you have some comic book movies that are going to be a little bit in that direction, where it's just to get a little pop out of it, to go through, to do some small things, and then you have your epics, you have your Jokers, you have your Avengers Endgame that are movies. They're works of art. They are great storytelling through and through. They just happen to have comic book characters in them. So it's a little bit of both.
Yep. Now, I pretty much feel the exact same way. I think there are clearly movies where you can see the formula, all right, which is pretty much every movie one in a series from Marvel. I don't care if it's Thor, if it's Captain America, if it's Iron Man, if it's Captain Marvel, if it's Black Panther. A Marvel origin movie is a Marvel origin movie. You see they can crank those out of the factory now. The Infinity Wars and the Endgames, those are something else. What they were able to achieve in Endgame, that's not your typical comic book film. That's the conclusion to 10 years of storytelling. And I don't care if you're writing books or if you're making movies or you're making television series or whatever, trying to end something after 10 years and land that plane effectively with that many threads to tie up, that is a Herculean effort. And that should not be, you don't crap on that. So, I think regular movies are the same way. Some, the non-comic book variety are the same way. Francis Ford Coppola has made some fantastic films. Francis Ford Coppola also gave us The Godfather 3, which is the biggest turd in mafia movie history. So, there are swings and there are misses, whether it's, comic book genre or otherwise. I don't think it's right to pigeonhole the entire genre and just say, well, it's all crap. It's all theme park stuff, because some of it's really not. So, all right, good question there for Alan. That's kind of where we're at there. Next question, which I cannot find. Dave, read the next dude mail question. Save me here.
All right, here we go. So from Raheem. Yo, fellas, greetings from the Big Easy. Is it just me, or does a 10-hour dental marathon sound more appealing than watching FSU or Miami football these days?
Oh.
Don't get me wrong. As a Bama fan, I've got no dog in this fight, but I had to ask, what the hell happened? Stay cool and roll tide. First of all, Raheem, thank you for listening, but don't ever say roll tide on here again. We will find you, and we will throw Nick Saban at you.
He's not very big, so that's not hard to do. He's a wee little man, Nick Saban.
It'll look like Rey Mysterio getting thrown against the wall. I'd rather have dental work done at this point than watch my Hurricanes continue to play some days. I really have a feeling this game's going to end in a 2-0 score where, unfortunately, some kicker will end up having a ball hiked over his head, and it's the only way the other team's going to score. So, that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, no, Dave and I were actually having this conversation via text the other day. I'd swear I think Florida State Miami 2019 is going to be played on the CW at noon in front of a packed house of like 50 people. So, much has been made about Florida State and where we're at. We're not a good football team at all. And that starts from the top down, at the head coach, all the way down through the staff and the players. A lot of reasons, very complicated reasons for why that is. A lot of discussion swirling about Willie Taggart and his future at Florida State. Could he conceivably be fired after 2 years? He could. I would say the likelihood of that even now is far lower than the likelihood of him sticking around for a year 3, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility. And his performance, particularly on game days, and the way he manages a game from an X's and O's and a personnel standpoint, very much begs that conversation to be had. So I think I actually have next question now, and I can read it. It's in front of me. Next question comes from Alicia. Dude mail question is for Ian. Okay, well, that's fitting that I'm reading this question. You said before that you have no interest in seeing Terminator Dark Fate. However, early reviews seem to indicate that this is probably the best Terminator flick since T2. Does that change your mind or sway your decision on whether you'll see the film or not? I mean, it doesn't sway my decision on whether I'll see it. I'm going to see it. It's just a matter of whether or not I'll spend the money to see it on the big screen, which probably still not. It's like I've said before, I'm just tired of the Terminator franchise. It's a fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me kind of thing here. We got Terminator 3, which was garbage. And then we heard, we're going to change it up. We're going to go serious. It's going to be Terminator Salvation. We've got Batman. As Christian Bale was coming off of Batman Begins. He was the big thing. You got Jeremy Ironside. We're going to kick it back. We're going to make it feel like Terminator again. And then Salvation came out, and it was, we're going to showcase the dude from Avatar as much as humanly possible with a horrible story. And it was awful. Then we're going to really change it up, and we're going to be Terminator Genesis. And we're really going to change the story, and you're not going to see this coming. Like, this is going to be time travel in a completely different way. And we've got Matt Smith from Doctor Who, and this is going to be awesome. You're going to love it. And it was awful. So just because James Cameron is on board and all that, fine. That's great. You got the director from Deadpool. I will see it at some point, but I've given that franchise enough of my money and been screwed by them enough that I don't trust them. Maybe a matinee if the movie comes out and it turns out to be decent, and I know some people who go see it and tell me personally, yeah, check it out, maybe. But I don't trust the Terminator franchise. So,
well, that said, I don't know if you've heard this or not, but they have had some theaters that have gone back and shown T2, or the advertised showing T2, and had some fans come in as a revival. Yeah, and they were surprised by having this movie be the one that's shown, so that they can go out and start talking about it and going through. And so far, even the ones that are not talking about critics, talking about fans that have enjoyed the series, expecting to go and see a movie that they really, really enjoyed in the past, getting the opportunity to go and see the new movie, and they've really enjoyed it.
Okay. Well, again, we'll see. I'm just going to proceed with a whole lot of caution. It's like that girl that you've asked out multiple times, and she's led you on and led you on and led you on and just never followed through with that date. That's kind of where I'm at with Terminator. Sorry, guys. You can bring back Sarah Connor all you want. She's awesome. But I'm just going to hold off on that, and we'll see. All right, last question comes from Chad. Hey guys, back when Chris Kennedy was on the program, you picked Houston versus LA to face off in the World Series. Turns out it's the Stros versus the Natties. Who wins and in how many games? I knew this one was coming. That's kind of why I wanted to get Scott's answer. But Dave, who you got in this series?
Because Scott said Houston, I'm going to go with the Nationals.
Okay.
And that is my entire reason why I haven't watched baseball at all this year. So because he said the Astros, I'm going to see the Nationals.
The Astros are really stinking good, dude. I mean, they're pitching. He's not lying. Between Verlander and Greinke and all those guys, I mean, they are smoking. I will take Houston in 6 with Scott, not because I'm going to side with my boy, but because I typically root against anything from the city of Washington, D.C. So if you're asking me Texas versus Washington, I'm going to side with the Texans and say go Stros. But again, the pitching for Houston, as jokes aside, is just absolutely out of sight. So, that tends to win out in these kind of things, even with a juiced baseball. Thanks, guys, for your questions. For Dude Mail is always a good time, and it's definitely because of you guys. So, time to fire it. We're getting down to the hour. Let's throw some white flag.
White flag.
Okay, white flag is the segment where we kind of talk about what's on our radar coming up in the next few weeks. Can be geek stuff, can be guy stuff, can be sports stuff, can be whatever. If it interests us and we're looking forward to it, then we like to talk about it. That's the gist, and it's the end of the show, hence white flag. Dave, what you looking forward to, man?
I am looking forward to 2 things. One, I will be going to Indiana this weekend with my girlfriend to hang out with her family, her friends a little bit. But get the chance to get a little bit of cool weather, enjoy that. I don't get a whole lot of that down here in Florida, so looking forward to a couple of days down there. Having the week leading up to the Miami-Florida State game off from work, and then whether or not they're crappy or not, I'm looking forward to my Miami Hurricanes playing the Florida State Seminoles, so I can cheer on my orange and green.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get an opportunity to record before that game. We will try, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, yep, I'm kind of right there with you. Florida State, Miami, even with bad football teams, I mean, good grief, man. We're guys in our 40s from Florida. This is the rivalry that we grew up with. It's one of two for me. It's the University of Miami and the University of Florida. Those are the two games that every year, if I can pick two on the schedule to win and lose the rest, those are the two that I want to win. They're rivalry games through and through. They are the reason why I love college football. It's the pageantry, it's the history, it's the tradition. It's just a great time. So, yes, they are a lot more fun to watch whenever both teams are good. Sadly, neither team is good in this case. They're both garbage, but we're still going to watch. We're still going to root for them. In my case, Florida State is my alum. That's where I went to school. So going to watch it and root for my Noles. Other stuff I'm looking forward to, the NASCAR playoffs have pretty well been my salvation from college football season. Much has been made about NASCAR and how they crown their champion. A lot of hardcore purists absolutely despise this format. It is not the way to crown a season-long champion based off consistency by any stretch of the imagination. This is much more the NCAA basketball tournament type of a playoff format for those who don't follow the sport. You start with 16 cars, you race 3 races, you cut off the bottom 4 finishers. You race 3 more, you cut off the bottom 4, you race 3 more, you cut off the bottom 4, and then your final 4 drivers shoot it out in a one-race winner-take-all shootout for the crown at the end of the year. I say all that to say it is high octane, it is intense, it is stressful. It's a blast to freaking watch, just like the NCAA tournament. There are buzzer beaters, there are Cinderella stories, and it helps that my guy's one of the badasses in the field. So that's great. At least I got something to pull for during the fall sports season. So that's it. Florida State, Miami, NASCAR playoffs, and that's what's on my radar. So thank you again to John Hartness for coming on to the program. Thank you to Scott for coming by. Glad he's feeling a little bit better. We'll certainly get him back for the college football midseason show here in a couple of weeks. And thanks again to everybody who listens and follows the program. You can find us online, dudesinhyperspace.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at The Hyper Dudes. Shoot us emails, dudesinhyperspace@gmail.com. We're always open to suggestions. If there's somebody that you want interviewed, a topic you want us to cover, something you want to address, by all means, shoot it our way. Hit us with a hashtag, an email, does not matter. We love to hear from you guys. So also, if you have an opportunity to leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher, wherever, we really appreciate those. That's what helps drive the show up through the rankings for people to find it and get discovered. When you cover geek stuff and sports stuff, that's a pretty niche audience. So all the reviews we can get really does go a long way to helping people find us. So thanks again to everybody for coming by. It was a great show, and we will be back next time for episode 11 of the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. See you guys.